want to know what else will make you feel old, chat? Torchwood Miracle Day came out 12 years ago, and a couple of years ago, Big Finish decided to pick up the story where they left off with a series of Torchwood The Story Continues releases. We've got the three-parter, Torchwood Aliens Among Us, then that sprung off into Torchwood God Among Us, parts 1, 2, and 3, and now we've got Torchwood Among Us parts 1, 2, and 3, which are being released over the next 3 months in replacement of the Torchwood monthly adventures, which are going on a brief hiatus. So I have not listened to God Among Us or Aliens Among Us. I have no idea what's happened in the interim. I did an awful lot of Googling and TARDIS wiki searching to find out what had happened. TLDR, Tracy Ann Oberman is back as Yvonne Hartman, but this is Yvonne Hartman from Pete's World, who hired a disgraced journalist called Tyler, who is now part of Torchwood. There's Mr. Colchester, who is also part of Torchwood, who has a luxurious, lovely voice. You've also got a character called Eng, who possessed the body of Gwen Cooper, who was one of the heralds of God, yes, actual God, and infiltrated the Torchwood team, killed Gwen's mum while possessing Gwen's body. And you've also got a character called Orr, who is this silvery, slightly decomposed looking person, who is, and I quote, going from the TARDIS wiki page, is a Sorvan sexual psychomorph, who is a member of Torchwood 3, who is able to adapt and transform their body into what the person they're transforming next to is most sexually attracted to, because it's a lot harder to kill or harm somebody who you're sexually attracted to. So Big Finish has been busy when it comes to the Torchwood range and continuing the story. And from what I can tell, God Among Us ended very, very badly. Jack is missing, presumed dead despite being immortal. Cardiff has been flooded, and the team has been scattered to the four winds, and Torchwood Among Us is essentially doing the whole One Piece thing after the time skip, where all of the main characters have been scattered, and now it's a case of what are they doing, what have they been up to, and how can we bring them together? And this is where we find Torchwood Among Us, which has got a quadrilogy of stories. We've got Aliens Next Door by Ash Darby, we've got Colin Alone by Una McCormack, Misty Eyes by Tim Foley, and Moderation by James Goss. These are a selection of writers who are very well acquainted with the Torchwood universe, and the cast, as you can tell from this list, is quite substantial. You know, Eve Miles, Paul Clayton, Johnny Green, Samantha Baird, Alexandria Riley, Kai Owen, etc., etc. Basically, almost everybody who is still surviving in the Torchwood team is here for the Among Us set. So, how does the story start? So, we've got Aliens Next Door, which follows the escapades of Orr and Eng, who are in a cul-de-sac in a very unassuming, small British town. And a lot of weird stuff is happening in this cul-de-sac, and they're essentially watching from a B&B, they're watching from the window, watching this small town slowly start to drive themselves crazy through paranoia, through suspicion, and also inside of the house as well, the Airbnb that they've rented it from. You've got Betty, played by Melanie Kilburn, who's the nice old landlady who gives them tea, gives them biscuits. They're spying on this town. Orr and Eng are looking out the back window. Let's play a clip from Aliens Next Door.
Look at us, two aliens watching the lives of humans, bored out of our minds.
Yeah, Torchwood was never dull.
What are you not telling me?
Paranoid?
Curious. 10 days in a cul-de-sac off a motorway. We're not just hiding out, are we?
Shh, shh. Here comes Mrs. Cladihue.
Knock, knock. Brought you some tea. And they were selling off donuts, raspberry, so they're not the nice kind.
You didn't have to.
Well, I know, but I saw them and I thought, not for me, not a sweet tooth, but it's a habit. My Sam always... Is that enough milk for you?
Yes, thank you. Wonderful, Mrs. Cladihue.
Interesting. I do not think I've had a donut before.
You've never had a donut?
No.
Are you foreign?
No, I'm surprising.
It's a really understated way to open what is meant to be one of the big Finish events of the year from Torchwood Among Us. And I appreciated that gear shift. I wasn't expecting, Torchwood, which kind of prided itself on big, massive, cataclysmic events like Children of Earth, like Miracle Day, which tend to open with a big bang. But Aliens Next Door is just these two mismatched aliens who are working for a now kind of defunct Torchwood, spying on a cul-de-sac. I appreciated that. I appreciated that shift in perspective. However, what I will say, I really did like Aliens Next Door, but it didn't really tell me anything about humanity that I didn't already know. And I know that that's kind of maybe a bit of a high bar to ask for a Torchwood Big Finish release, but I think it's trying to say something about these small insular communities and how they're able to tear themselves apart through gossip, through hearsay, through bigotry, and you've got the nosy neighbors who are basically the embodiments of Karens who are trying to do whatever they can to spread lies and malicious rumors about people just to enrich their own lives and stuff like that. I completely get that. I just think that it maybe spent a little bit too much time just setting up Orr and Eng in this scenario and not really paying off what it wanted the audience to feel about it, other than this is quite bad, and we're also setting up a mystery with this strange voice on the phone, which does not get resolved in this box set, but will presumably be paying off in future Among Us sets. I think that this is a story that might pay off when you look back on it, once you know the full Among Us story. Once everything has been laid bare, you can come back to this and maybe see some seeds being sown here. But as it is right now, it's an interesting, intimate character piece on this small cul-de-sac, but I do think it maybe could have taken a few more risks. I think it maybe could have gone in a bit more interesting direction. What's tough about Aliens Next Door is because, and I understand this is a fault of mine, is that I don't really know Orr and Eng. So when they were talking to each other, unless they said each other's names, I didn't know who was talking. I don't know who these two characters are. So I think maybe just for the sake of me and any potential newcomers going into Torchwood Among Us Part 1, maybe have opened in medias res for a different situation for the two, where you can get acclimatized to their voices. I kind of wish that maybe there was a bit more of an easing in on these two characters, because, like I said, I did a lot of Googling, I did a lot of TARDIS Wiki stuff, and I understand that I'm jumping in on a third series of trilogies here. This is the third trilogy from the Torchwood Story Continues range. That's kind of my fault, but needs must, I guess. To be honest, after 2 seasons, I don't really know who these characters are. If you've been listening to this range from the start and you don't know who these characters are, that's a problem. I will say, though, I did really like Orr. I really liked the dynamic that they had with Eng, and I also just really liked the performance from Samantha Bett. I thought that they did a really great job. This sort of very curious, slightly sardonic person who just wanted to be out and about a bit more, but was also quite restrained. It was clearly like a bit of a tightrope walk for the character, for the actor, but I thought they did a really good job. One issue, though, that I will say that I don't really think is my fault is that it was kind of tough to get a sense of place. Like, sometimes characters would just end up hopping across the street and there was no proper transition. I was like, okay, so who stayed behind in the B&B? Who's actually gone out to investigate the cul-de-sac? Why are there monster noises all of a sudden? Who's transformed into what? What's going on? That bit was a bit rough. I think that the lack of clarity in the place and who was interacting with who in the third act kind of robbed the story of the impact I think it was going for. But still, it was a good shift for the Torchwood range, and I appreciated the characters and the performances. I thought the performances were really strong. But like I said, I've seen the drama play out before in numerous other shows, in numerous other movies and TV programs, where you get the aliens of the title, and nosy Karens and nosy neighbours start rumours about them, and then all hell starts breaking loose and arson happens, and big grand acts of violence and these big gestures from this community. If you're a young viewer, and if you're if you're a young viewer who hasn't watched an awful lot of media, I can imagine this being pretty impactful. But for me, I've seen a lot of this in your standard kitchen sink BBC drama. Still, strong start. And then we go to another massive gear shift where we meet Colin Colchester in Colin Alone by Una McCormack. Now, Colin Colchester Price is the husband of John Colchester, who has gone missing, who is on the run, who is hiding out to do Torchwood shenanigans elsewhere, which has left Colin on his own, being investigated by some nefarious organisations wanting to know who the hell is Torchwood, what the hell is Torchwood. And what essentially happens over the course of this hour-long story is that Colin's life is essentially ruined, where you've got this guy who is just trying to live the most ordinary life imaginable. He works at a food bank, and he lives in a bit of a dingy apartment that has started to develop a leak, and then his husband goes missing. And then everything possible just starts going wrong. We've got Joblip Sibtain, who plays Colin in this story. He played Tarak in The Waters of Mars. He was one of the characters on Bowie Base 6 who got possessed by the Flood. And he was also Brasso in the recent Star Wars series Andor. For those of you who need clarification on who Brasso is the guy who hits a stormtrooper with a brick. That's why he's everybody's favourite. But Joplin plays this really human and down-to-earth character who is just going to the shop after having a meeting with two dodgy, weird these two government agency people who interrogate his life, who go through his emails, who go through his phone records. And then he tries to go to the shop, only to discover that he is being followed. Let's play a clip from Colin Alone.
Hello, how are you? Can I help you get anything off the top shelf? No? Okay, here's what I've got today. All a bit of a meal for one, I'm sorry to say, but that's where we are at the moment. You know, what with my husband having disappeared, who knows where, 'cause I don't. Anyway, in my basket today, loo roll, you already know about that. I thought I'd try one of those plant-based ready meals they've been pushing at us. These are chocolate puddings, but they've used coconut rather than milk, which I think makes them vegan. Not that I'm vegan, though I am thinking about it, but I don't want to give up chocolate. And, you know, they come in these 4 little plastic pots. You do wonder sometimes whether what you're doing makes any difference at all, to be honest. So that's my dinner sorted. Do feel free to join me at the till. Environmentally responsible loo roll. Plant-based curry. God, it looks awful. Really should cook more. You're not a great conversationalist, are you? Chocolate plastic puds. Oh, I hope you're remembering all this, because I don't want to have to take Jeff and Mira through the whole lot next time.
I think that Una McCormack is one of the most underrated writers in the Doctor Who Expanded Universe. They've got this wonderful sense of the mundane and the wonderful observations of the world around them. It is very like James Goss-esque, especially if you listened to the postcard from Mr. Colchester release that came out last year, written by James Goss. You can absolutely tell that the Colchesters have a very specific outlook on the world, even though Colin does not work for Torchwood. Colin's dry wit and sardonic observations are constrained to just going to the supermarket or going to the pub or working at the local food bank. And honestly, I want to know from Una McCormack, I want to know who hurt you. I want to know why you decided to inflict an hour of just us watching this hapless, very kind man's life fall apart for an hour. Una, why would you do that? Like, this was quite devastating. And I mean that in a good way. This was an enthralling listen as you just see the dominoes of this man's life just topple one by one in very realistic ways that give the agency that is supposedly following him perfect plausible deniability. But you can imagine stuff like this happening to you should you be in the crosshairs of some nefarious organizations. It was pretty wild watching, he gets a leak in his flat, and he tries to get in touch with the landlord to fix it, but he's not supposedly paid the service charge because the bank account is in his husband's name. His husband is missing, is a wanted fugitive, so he can't access the bank account. His phone gets stolen, he gets mugged, so his phone gets taken off him, so he can't even call for help or ring the police. The bank's not open when he's not at work, and he has to be at work at a certain time each day, otherwise he's going to get fired, and there's no bus route that gets him there, and these tiny little inconsequential things just start piling up, and it's quite frankly anxiety inducing in the best ways. This was a really surprising, captivating listen. When I think of okay, I was going to listen to Torchwood Among Us, I want to see Gwen Cooper with the machine gun and the fun banter with Reese. I want to listen to Paul Clayton and be fun, witty, sexy older gay guy stuff. I want to meet these new characters, Aang and Orr and all that stuff. I was not expecting to be so utterly devoted to Colin in this box set, a character who prior to this I don't even think I knew the name of. I didn't know who this dude was, and yet I was so enamored with him from beginning to end, and I sympathised with him so much, and Joplin Sibtain does such a wonderful job portraying just the poetry of the everyday man who's kind of in mourning and is grieving the supposed loss of his husband. It was devastating. I really, really liked Colin alone, and I was not expecting that going in. Like I said, Una McCormack is such an underrated writer, and she's done an absolute standout job here. Colin alone is really something quite special. It was pretty devastating. On the other end of the spectrum is Misty Eyes by Tim Foley, and this gives us the Gwen Cooper gun-wielding badass Welsh mom who we saw in Miracle Day. So after the events of Gods Among Us, they have been moved to a lighthouse in a very rural coastal town, in a very far removed coastal town, because, Cardiff was flooded, they had to get away, and they're trying to lie low, and they're trying to arrange a more long-term deal with the owner of the lighthouse in order to stay there on a long-term basis. However, there's some weird, misty figures in the night who bear a striking resemblance to Aang, who pays Gwen and Reese a visit, and considering that the last time Gwen and Aang met each other, Aang was possessing Gwen's body and killed her mother in cold blood, and even went to the funeral, and there's a lot of bad blood there, and Gwen Cooper is just the most badass gun-wielding mom. Let's play a clip from Misty Eyes.
Not a bad shot, this.
In here.
Oh, you're back. I'm making risotto, and you brought her back for dinner. What's going on?
That's exactly what I want to know.
Maybe we'd best sit down for this.
Nope, I'm okay. Move over, love. I want to get into the cutlery drawer
Why?
to get my hidden gun.
Whoa, there's a gun in there.
Behind the spatulas.
What if Anwin got into that drawer?
It's full of your bloody chef's knives, isn't it? Who's letting Anwin into the kitchen unsupervised? I'm not. Are you?
Guys.
Shut it! No, actually, do the opposite of shutting it and start telling us.
Don't be pointing that gun at her, Gwen.
I just wanted to talk.
I said I'm gonna talk. No need for a gun.
But now you'll do it on my terms.
I'm happy to anyway.
Do the washing up, Reese. I'll take this next door.
You can stay in here. I want to hear this too. It concerns both of us, doesn't it?
Fine. You're still doing the washing up. First things first. Is Anwin safe?
She's fine. They won't come for her.
They? Who's they?
So there is a threat that Gwen, Reese and Aang have to combat over the course of this story in the form of these weird misty spectres that are surrounding the lighthouse, which bear a striking resemblance to Aang. However, what's really important about this story is sort of like recalibrating the relationship between Gwen and Aang. And this is sort of what I expected from Torchwood Among Us. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I think it's only natural to sort of figure out where these characters stand after the last two sets of trilogies and where they are with each other and how people like Gwen get back involved with Torchwood and what sort of brings them out of hiding again. That was kind of what I expected from Among Us, and Misty Eyes does that quite admirably. It's a really interesting story about forgiveness. And obviously, what Aang has done, I assume, because I've not probably listened to the box set, is morally dubious. Like, that seems like the understatement of the century here. But they are still part of Torchwood. And, you know, Gwen Cooper, as somebody whose family grew up on the Rift, who is now part of Torchwood, Torchwood is essentially in her blood, so she can't quite let go of it as easily as she likes to let on, and Rhys also knows that. Now, Kai Owens, who plays Rhys, and Eve Miles, who play Gwen Cooper, they've got great chemistry and great banter with each other. That's just wonderful to see over the course of this story. That still remains despite all of these years, and that's so refreshing to listen to. And just the wonderful domesticity of it all, where there's a gun behind the spatulas in the cutlery drawer that Rhys didn't know about. Stuff like that. That was really funny. I really appreciated that. And the performances really, really come to a head over the course of the story, where Eve just absolutely lets loose with this character's pent-up frustrations at the situation that she's in. And I really, really liked it. And the journey that she goes on over the course of this hour-long episode it felt really emotionally loaded and quite profound. I really liked Misty Eyes. I'm a little bit worried that it will get sort of lost in the shuffle of the box set, because it is the one that kind of conforms the most. But I'm very glad that we did have a story like Misty Eyes here to sort of let the uninitiated back into the Torchwood universe in a way that is welcoming, but is also allowing audiences to catch up and sort of get a hint as to where the story's going next. Now, last up is Moderation by James Goss. Now, Tyler Steele is another character who I knew basically nothing about going into this. He's played by Johnny Green. He is a former journalist, a disgraced journalist who was brought into Torchwood through the Pete's World version of Yvonne Hartman from Torchwood in Pete's World. And he is now working at a news outlet, and Petra is one of the main journalists there. Petra is played by Maya Soraya, and Petra is essentially being paid to be a provocateur, whether or not they realise it. The news outlet is essentially being completely driven by AI and algorithms. You basically pitch a story to an AI, and then it will let you know if it's even worth pursuing, if there's an audience for it, if there's any revenue in it, if there's any clicks for it, which means that actual good, effective journalism at this organisation has gone down the crapper, but Petra is trying to fight against the system. Tyler, on the other hand, is working with the moderation team for this news outlet, and because of the need to get engagement, the need to get clicks, and to get eyeballs on the website and on the story, the moderation has been laxed back to an extent where they are now essentially allowing hate speech in the comment section, and the hate speech begets more hate speech, which also begets more clicks. Now, Petra is trying to do this hard-hitting journalism and try and take down these authoritarian far-right figures. However, there is a push and pull. Here's a clip from Moderation.
Mr. Stanton Clark.
Hegsy?
Hegsy. Today you're being sentenced for filming inside court.
Jailed for committing journalism? A cover-up of a pedo ring that goes right to the top! Woo!
The grooming ring have all been found guilty and received sentences of 20 years. Where's the cover-up?
Yeah, they'd have got less if it hadn't been for me. Isn't that right, boys? Yeah! Yeah, of course. I'm doing this for the kiddies!
But what about your arrest in 2005?
Old news! Dealing a bit of weed? Come on, love, do better.
No, this isn't. Turns out the original charge wasn't just selling drugs. There were prostitutes.
Ah, few friends. Female entrepreneurs I was helping.
Like this one.
Ophelia. I'd still like to feel her, right, lads? Woo!
In 2005, she was in care. She was 15.
Ah, that was our boom moment. Massively gifable. Well done, Petra. Metrics are through the roof. Okay, troopers, find a few more turds in the sandpit. It's my kid. Gotta take this. Go!
Celebratory cupcake. They've stuck my face on them.
No thanks. You're eating your own face.
Yeah, I taste kind of orange.
You look happy.
You've come to spoil my moment. Found a way to stop people looking at my Hegsy scoop?
No. There's something I want to show you.
So, I get the sense that James Goss has an awful lot to say in terms of modern culture and modern tabloids and essentially sensationalized journalism. I thought this was a really fascinating approach to the story where it's almost like Torchwood meets Black Mirror. You get the sense that maybe 10 years ago this would have been seen as a form of satire that's really unrealistic. That sort of has the basis that it could be true, but it's absolutely ridiculous and is not going to happen. However, looking at the current news and current affairs media landscape that we have right now, moderation seems to really have its finger on the pulse here, where it's essentially a content farm where you get AI to write these really low quality articles that are just there to generate clicks. But what's most interesting, though, in terms of the observations around the broader culture, is the idea on permitting hate speech and the lack of moderation in comment sections and on social media websites, where essentially Petra is the collateral damage for this website potentially getting all the clicks and all the attention, because Petra is a Muslim. She wears a headscarf and she's considered by many people in the profession to be one of the bad Muslims because of the journalism that she does. But she's out there wanting to try and get the story, wanting to try and find this middle ground between the salacious reporting but also something that actually does hard-hitting work. And then once she does that, Tyler has to sift through all of the comments and read all of the death threats, all of the rape threats, all of this stuff that is this vitriol, this bile that is just churned out at an alarming rate, and he has to sift through it and moderate. This has the basis in reality of TikTok moderators who essentially are traumatized and have to go to therapy because of the amount of stuff that gets uploaded onto TikTok that they have to ban and make sure doesn't get seen by the wider public, the wider viewers. And they go to therapy over it and they're traumatized for it and they get PTSD, and there's very little aftercare for them because there's no benefit to that under late stage capitalism. And moderation does something very similar, where Tyler just cannot believe what he's reading, but also the fact that the higher-ups want that engagement, because any publicity is good publicity, even though Petra is the one in the firing line, how she is the collateral damage. It kind of reminded me, the recent backlash, I say backlash in quotes, to Halle Bailey in The Little Mermaid. And I've not seen the film yet, I haven't read any reviews, no idea if it's any good, no idea what the general reception is going to be. But Disney must have known going into The Little Mermaid and casting Halle Bailey that she was going to be on the receiving end of an outstanding amount of backlash, an outstanding amount of harassment, like off the charts, that it would be content farms for reactionary grifters on the internet to churn out their white supremacist dogma, and that she would be at the epicenter of all of this, and that in the past people like Kelly Marie Tran from the Star Wars franchise had to leave social media because of the sheer amount of racist vitriol that they got. And it makes me wonder that even if The Little Mermaid is the best movie ever, if it's terrific, if it's creatively inspired and all those buzzwords, whether or not the calculation was made by Disney that this amount of backlash and this amount of harassment to center around this young star, whether or not that was an acceptable calculation to make in order to do what they wanted to do with The Little Mermaid. Is there like an aftercare? Is there a sort of procedure to look after and protect this star from essentially en masse stochastic terrorism, where schools and theatres and nightclubs and stuff are shot up in the name of these things that they purport to hate? I know that this has gone in a bit of a weird direction for a Torchwood Among Us review, but that was sort of where my mind went here, where you've got this news outlet in this Torchwood story that wants to press people's buttons. It wants to foster these radicalized comment sections, and there's no actual safeguarding for the people who make the stories to protect them, to even though that they are the ones at the center of all of this. I've got a sense that I'm kind of losing the audience. I've not had a single comment in the live chat for like 2 or 3 minutes. Whether or not I'm talking nonsense or no one's listening or you are listening intently, it's kind of hard to tell. But that was where my mind went here. And I think that's a hallmark of... Oh, thank you, Alex. I think that's sort of the hallmark of good sci-fi, or at least good storytelling, of like good metatextual fiction, where even though we're talking in this story about journalism, about tabloids and stuff like that, it kind of spreads out into these wider cultural topics and these wider cultural conversations. And for example, I'm intently listening, sorry. Oh, no, that's fine, I just wasn't sure. It's hard to tell. I can't tell if I'm saying nonsense. It's hard to read the room when you've got a live chat. So yeah, I'm all for diversifying media when it comes to race swapping The Little Mermaid, to putting people of colour or people of different religions front and centre in adaptations of stories from the 20th century. Because you've got all these characters from the 20th century where, created during Jim Crow, or created during women's suffrage, or created at a time when there was no proper equality and there was no representation. So I understand the need in the 21st century, if you are in late stage capitalism and you can only adapt, you can only reinterpret, you can't create original thoughts anymore because there's no money in it, that you do reappropriate these characters. You do adapt to these characters with different races, ethnicities, genders, etc. Completely get it. It's essentially trying to account for a moral failing in the 20th century. But when you make that calculation, you're going to get a lot of backlash. And is that backlash maybe been coded into the marketing, has been coded into the messaging, has been coded into essentially making sure that the people who are at the epicenters of this are protected? If that makes sense. But they didn't do a good job with Kelly, considering Disney owned Star Wars and could have protected them more. Yeah, that's the thing. I've seen... It was sort of like when Chris Pratt said some really stupid things online, and then all of these stars came out and said, "Oh, we stand with Chris Pratt. We love Chris Pratt. Chris Pratt's lovely." And like none of that support came out for Brie Larson when there were these massive harassment campaigns against her. It's a bit concerning. Having a black mermaid makes more sense than a white from a biological sense because of what colours a deep sea creature society that was. Yeah, but of course that doesn't matter. Even if it was scientifically accurate, even if it wasn't scientifically accurate, it still wouldn't excuse the bigotry. But is it like, okay, we're going to race swap The Little Mermaid. We're going to have her played by Halle Bailey. Does Halle Bailey get a say in how this is portrayed? I'm not trying to lambast Disney or whatever. They definitely deserve it from certain counts, and they're not. They are essentially a bastion of neoliberal politics, so they're not exactly the most progressive. But did Halle Bailey get a say in all of this? Did Halle Bailey is she protected? Does she have an online social media team that shields her from all of this harassment? I don't know, but is that part of the calculation? I know that this is a massive tangent, but these are sort of the ideas that James Goss is kind of dealing with in moderation, even though it's more to do with journalism as opposed to the entertainment media industry in general. But that was sort of where my mind springboarded to when listening to this story. These news organizations, they know what they're doing. They know the communities that they're fostering. They know the hatred that they're whipping up in the name of engagement and clicks and things like that. We've gone over the comment sections of GB News and Talk TV video segments and stuff where they're complaining about diversity in media. And then you go into the comment section and it's just full neo-Nazi white supremacist stuff. It's essentially just a more amped up version of what's being said in the videos, and they know full well that that's the audience that they're cultivating. They'll say, no, we disavow, we don't endorse that, but they know that that's the audience that they are appealing to. They know that that is the audience that is watching their stuff, but that is still part of the calculation. And I think that James Goss has his eyes firmly fixed on that aspect of tabloid journalism. And it was a really interesting story. This is the type of stuff that I think Torchwood really excelled in. Even in some of its weaker stories, it still managed to ask these really big idea questions. Kind of like Meat from Series 2, which was on about, factory farming and unethical meat consumption and stuff like that. But it literalized it. And I feel like moderation is, James Goss is a figurehead in, Big Finish's creative rooms for Torchwood. James Goss, I believe, is, the showrunner of the Torchwood range. So, of course, he's really tuned into what Torchwood's mission statement was. And moderation seems like a natural extension of that ethos. So, overall, after all of those long tangents, do I recommend Torchwood Among Us? Personally, I did really enjoy it. I think that we don't have back-to-back bangers here, but we still have some really strong stories with interesting character work, a lot on their minds both emotionally and metatextually and socio-politically, all that good stuff, all those wonderful buzzwords. I think that the cast are really strong. There's some great music along the way. Colin alone is the surprising sucker punch of the box set. Una McCormack did an amazing job endearing us to a character, or endearing me to a character, I should say, that I knew next to nothing about going into this box set. And moderation by James Goss has an awful lot on its mind, or at the very least, it caused me to springboard into a lot of ethical conversations when it comes to stochastic terrorism and media outlets and the enabling or the unenabling of moderation teams. It was really interesting stuff. And the cast, of course, across the board were great. Eve Miles is amazing in Misty Eyes. I really liked the banter between Eng and Orr in Aliens Next Door, and some of the quiet, subversive details of that story. This was a very, very good box set. I am just the wrong person to ask as to whether or not this is a worthy follow-up to what the Torchwood range has been doing before in Aliens Among Us and in God Among Us. I'm jumping onto this essentially at the beginning of The Return of the King without watching the Two Towers of the Fellowship of the Ring. So please take my opinion with a grain of salt here. But I thought this was really strong stuff. There's definitely a barrier here. There's definitely a lot of prior research and a lot of prerequisite to get into. A lot of stuff has happened with the Torchwood team since Miracle Day, including but not limited to brand new characters, deaths of recurring cast members and the disappearances of cast members, and the reintroductions of characters who were thought to have been dead, like Yvonne Hartman. There's a lot of prerequisite. I'm the wrong person to ask as to whether or not these box sets are good, or if this is a worthy follow-up. But I will say, for me, I was able to force myself past those prerequisites and really enjoy and appreciate this box set. I'm looking forward to where the story goes. I wish that maybe they'd focused more on the immediate circumstances of the characters rather than setting up this mysterious voice on the phone in these stories, so it felt like it was being pulled in different directions, but in the grand scheme of things, that's a bit of a nitpick. This was really good stuff. I liked this an awful lot. Yeah, whether or not this box set is good is sus, but I did enjoy it. I would not throw this into the cold vacuum of space.